There we go. Well, welcome to the Missed Link Week on Border Patrol Radio.
What are you saying? We're missing links?
We're missing links. We missed one last week, so we're going to have to double up this week.
This is the missing links program. Well. Did you have a nice Easter?
We did, yeah. Very uneventful, but it was good.
Us too.
And you as well? Yeah.
Yep. And we've had since then a week of summer-like weather, which is so out of character all of a sudden. Obviously, you can only see from here up, but I'm wearing shorts. So yeah, no, I'm not in my pajamas.
Okay. We'll believe you.
Unlike, speaking of pajamas, unlike our friends who are going on strike.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The union, which has to date fought very hard to have the people stay at home because the workplace is too dangerous, is now telling that the workers will have to actually come and physically be on the picket line to get their strike pay.
Yep, old-fashioned picket lines form an essential part of any strike, says the union, meaning members will not be able to conduct their job action on Zoom.
I'm kind of hoping there's no supply issues, because I know that 45-gallon drums and old crates are probably going to be pretty hard to come by.
I tell you, it's been very strange. And my understanding is they want something like 30%.
Mm-hmm. Which would be okay if they actually had to go to work and do that, I guess. But if you sit back and think that you're sitting at home, you don't have expenses for car, you don't have expenses for transportation, you don't have expenses for business attire, suits and dresses and the like. You don't have to have money for your 3 coffee breaks a day. You don't have to have money for your lunches out. It's hard to justify a 30%, but well, good for them if they get it, I guess. It just means that somewhere along the line, we're going to have to figure out what particular government programs are going to get cut, because we can't keep everything running.
Yeah, well, I think that the folks who have gone through the last couple of years who work outside of the public sector aren't going to give them a lot of sympathy. Unfortunately, not a lot of sympathy, because those who were impacted by the pandemic, a lot of them lost their jobs, they lost their businesses. There was a lot of hardship. People died. And so when the public sector, civil service, and never lost a paycheck, didn't they were allowed to work from home, and now they want to work from home like normal, like all the time, and so on. The folks who toughed it out and are still feeling the impact of that pandemic, they're not going to shed a tear for these people.
Well, and you know as well as I do, when you're in the public service, you're always a target, particularly around election times and contract negotiation times. John Q. Public really doesn't have much support for the public service anyway, until it directly affects them. Like, why is it taking 16 months to get my passport done? I have an important holiday to go on in 3 weeks, so they should be processing my passport application real quick. I don't really understand immigration, but those immigration people are probably a bunch of neo-fascists, until it comes to the point when, gee, my sister can't get here from country X. So yeah, it's a like most law enforcement agencies and the like, the public services brand with apathy until it's not.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we'll see how that works next week we'll be able to, I guess, comment on how the strike actually impacts the folks on the street. But there's a lot of this past 2 weeks has been. I know we tend to look at migration issues as primarily, but the government in Canada has had some serious problems in communicating its interest in increasing immigration and refugee numbers when a newspaper like the Toronto Sun picks up on it and says it's going to be easier to come to Canada by virtue of a government policy that was never discussed in Parliament, and I guess it got made public through whatever sources the reporter got. This is Lauren Gunther, and suddenly some bureaucrats have decided that you can't talk about that, and it starts to show what this government bill to basically censor what's online or even in the media.
Yeah.
And so it's starting to be a little strange here that some bureaucrat gets on the horn and tells a reporter, you gotta take that off Twitter because and it wasn't even controversial. It's basically their own policy. Like, what are we talking about? And moreover, this bill that is soon to become law here in Canada, and it's quite, it even affects us, Bob. It's it's going to say what content Canadians are presented with when they use these digital services. So we're going to be forced by the government to have Canadian content all the time on even our podcasts. Like, please,
Well, you never know where that's going to end up, and will it be taken down because our communications aren't printed in both official languages, or like I don't know what's all in Bill C-11. I haven't had a chance to, or really I haven't had a chance. I haven't had the interest, I guess, to go and take a look at it clause by clause and see what it is or isn't going to do, and how it's going to affect. And shame on me for that, I guess. But
yeah, but think about this, Bob. What is the government, interfering in? I mean, unless it's actually the content is, hateful, whatever that means, or criminal, whatever that means anymore. This is starting to get very strange. When we were kids, you say, I don't care what you say, it's a free country. Remember that saying when you were a kid? Now we're now going to have some bureaucrat who's on strike at the moment telling me what can be on the internet, or what I can watch, what I can say, next thing is, I mean, they're already talking about what I can drive, what I can eat. I mean, this is really getting very.
How many drinks you can have in the course?
How many drinks you can have? I mean, you start to look at this and go, what is wrong here? What is going on?
I guess the only thing that I'd probably beg to differ on the issue of the censorship team. I think you're probably going to find that those people will be designated as essential pretty quickly.
Essential for what?
Well, essential so that they can keep track of what's going on and tell us what we can't watch.
Look, this is very dark for me, because they keep talking about free press, free expression, but it's okay as long as it meets their criteria. And who's they? Like, I'm starting to wonder who these they people are. They, them, it, he, she, it, whatever. It's starting to get a little strange. I'm sorry, but I'm seriously wondering, these people have all their screws tightened.
Yeah, well, I don't. It used to be an old joke is they finally found who they were, and it was three guys in a rowboat. Well, according to, I guess, official standards, now we have to say three individuals of undetermined gender in the middle of a structure that floats in the middle of a lake somewhere in some part of the country called Canada.
Yeah.
Is probably.
But this we spoke about this in pre-production. A lot of this stuff starts off in the States, that, and it gets copycatted up here, and so they come up with these schemes in the US, and then somebody in Ottawa says, hey, they're doing this nonsense in Washington. Let's do the same thing here.
I wonder though, has there been an equivalent of C11 in the States? I mean, that I
Well,
can't
they
see.
tried it. You remember they were going to put together a thing, committee through the equivalent of the CRTC in the States, the Federal Communications
FCC?
Commission, FCC, and that was basically very quickly sent back. And remember the woman, she was even nominated by the Biden administration, and they quickly pulled her, and she was gone. And she was going to be the communications czar, and even that was too much for the MSNBCs of the world, much less the Foxes of the world. I said, no way you're going to start telling us what we can watch or not watch, or what we can broadcast. And over the line stuff is really becoming pretty evident to me that we must be getting near the end of the crazy season, because did you hear about the Bud Light boycott?
No, I didn't.
There's an anti-trans backlash at going after Anheuser-Busch because they decided to put the trans guy on cans of beer. But unfortunately, people got so angry with the brewery that they've lost 5 billion of their market share, or rather their market cap. Their value of Anheuser-Busch stocks is dropping off a cliff, because they're like, what are you doing? This is beer. So I can't wait for the Canadian version of that to come out. Look, it's just a question of time. That guy maybe in Milton who likes to wear the big prosthetic breasts will show up on Canadian beer cans next.
Well,
I'm just saying.
I know.
And you can't make this up. I mean, this is for real.
Well, I think, yeah, and I you can't make this stuff up. It reminds me very much of the one stand-up comedian that used to come in when I worked on the border. And the gentleman would just sit in our waiting room. And his comment was, he says, yeah, I don't mind waiting. I can watch what's going on here, and I can make up things that I can do in my shows. And because you just can't make this stuff up. And it's so true. Here we are thinking, how the hell would a place like Canada have a censorship law? And apparently we're going to have one very quickly.
Well, that's because there's a propensity of people to not want to upset people who make up this stuff, because we're just so nice. So, you got a lunatic guy coming up, or a gal coming up with some sort of program. I really don't want to be critical, because it might hurt their feelings. And I'm at the point now, I really don't care. If you're gonna talk stupid, I'm gonna confront you, say you're talking stupid. So stop this, okay? It's like the business of the analogy of the vegans. Okay, if you want to be a vegan, I don't care if you want to be. I just don't want to be a vegan. So you don't make me want to be a vegan. And you can see this whole business of, well, we want to do this, so you must do it. We want to tell you what you can read. We want to tell you what kind of car you can buy soon. It reminds me of the communists back up until the late 89, 90, where if you want to buy a car in Hungary or Poland, you got to buy a Trabant, but you didn't know what color it's going to be, and you didn't know when you're going to get it. But that's the only car you could buy, because the government decided that's the car you're going to get. And now we're telling us, the government saying, and again, downstream, doing this in the States, so that the Canadian government does the same thing. You have to buy an electric car after 2030, whatever percentage is going to be, it depends on, but that's, they're not going to have car gas. What is the word? Internal combustion, ICE cars. So internal combustion
fossil fuel driven vehicles.
Yeah, well, the only fossils are the ones that are dreaming up this nonsense. But anyway, the business of telling me that I have to buy an electric. What do you mean I have that? The market will decide. But oh no, we live in a capitalist system. Well, when did the government start deciding what kind of cars you can drive? what kind of food you can eat. Now they're saying, well, there's going to be additives in your food, like what, bugs? Well, we don't want to tell you there's really bugs going to be in there. Well, I thought you had to have, a proper
Labeling.
transparent labeling thing. Yeah, but this is good for you. No, it's not. I don't want to have bugs in my soup or bugs in my
Cornflakes.
pancakes or whatever,
Yeah.
right? So don't tell me that I have to do this. And of course, the whole boogeyman stuff it's all goes back to climate change. It's like we talked about this, the religion. So I got to tell me
Yeah.
what to eat. You tell me what to drive. You tell me what I can read. And then I have to walk on eggshells if I say anything, because it might upset somebody who's got some screwy philosophy. I'm sorry,
And I
but
guess,
I'm getting long in the tooth now, and I don't want to hear this nonsense anymore.
but it's just you're hearing one side of it. Yeah, electric cars are good.
Yeah,
Fossil fuel cars are bad.
yeah.
Okay. Couple of things that come with that is the batteries that are driving these new EV vehicles are very, very hard mined. They're toxic in themselves, and we haven't really figured out, well, what do we do with the batteries when they're no longer good for the vehicle
You mean the recycling of them? Not?
or not?
Yes.
We can't have fossil fuels, but the last time I looked, a Tesla still runs on rubber tires, right? That's a byproduct of fossil fuels.
Yes.
Most of the Teslas or any electric car still has plastics in them.
Yes.
Plastics are a fossil fuel.
Yes. Roads you drive on, guess what is asphalt?
Yeah, which is a fossil
Oil-based
fuel
product. That's right.
But and coupled with that, you're still looking at this whole issue of, and again, to our brethren in Quebec who are still without electricity after the ice storm. How are you getting your electric cars charged?
These are mute points in the press.
And I guess they are, but it still doesn't. We're running headlong towards the analogy I used to use was we're on a speedboat with a throttle stuck wide open and the rudder in a straightforward position that is non-turnable heading for Niagara Falls. Are we that much of a lemming society that we're just taking all this on face value and running for that cliff?
I believe so. There's a lot of indications that we are like lemmings. Yeah, but we're also I guess there's an awful lot of folks who just are too busy trying to make ends meet and are not paying attention to the crazy stuff that's going on, and will catch up with us.
Which yeah.
If you looked at this morning's Border Hawk news, the news is all bad. I mean,
well,
the headlines are
El Paso 1,000 plus illegals on a daily basis. Something about down in the numbers that are just on the other side of San Diego. There's nearly 46,000 boat migrants reached last year, and only 215 were deported. Yeah, it's not great numbers, and
well, and it's this other one that the African and Middle Eastern migrants are amassing along the border wall in San Diego. Like, what do you mean amassing? And yet they're continually going on about they're dealing with this on a security level. How can you possibly do that? Because if you already know that there's literally tens of thousands of people who aren't from Mexico piling up at your southern border, what are you doing about it? Yet next door here to us in Michigan, they're issuing driver's licenses to illegal aliens. Now, you tell me how someone who's or undocumented aliens, whatever the euphemism is,
whatever, yeah.
Okay. So tell me how someone who has no fixed address, has no income, suddenly shows up, and now you can get a driver's license or a state ID because we don't want to upset anybody. Okay, Michigan Democrats give driver licenses to undocumented immigrants because it's a matter of human dignity. Have you ever heard it? I mean, seriously? And
Well,
apparently there are 19 states, and Washington, D.C. have similar laws in the U.S. So apparently everyone who shows up legally or otherwise should be afforded the same privilege as anybody else who follows the law in the U.S. And I can see this happening in Canada as well. And it's just, like I say, we're always downstream to this stuff. So,
well, I think that's probably what you mentioned earlier on in the broadcast here was the C11, where the columnist took something from the government's own policy papers, published it, and now they want it taken down because it might be construed as being incorrect. Well, or is it we don't want that information out because we don't want people rising up with pitchforks and it's gone beyond stupid.
yeah, that's right. And interestingly enough, again, in the background, still from the news integrator at BorderHawk, the EU is building fences all around themselves with third countries. It says that between 2014 and 2022, the 19 EU borders grew from fences grew from 315 kilometers to over 2,000 kilometers. They actually built fence around themselves because they've come to the conclusion that they really got to do something here. And this is, all about, if you're going to have a community that deals with the influx, particularly from third world countries, you better start doing something. And so even though quietly they're talking about, in the EU being so generous to their third world migrants. In fact, if you go on Twitter, you can actually see the official document put out by the Schengen Visa Info, SchengenVisaInfo.com of how the EU has built fences around their borders because they can't deal with the tens of thousands of folks showing up every month, and they simply cannot absorb it. And of course, given the situation in Ukraine, Russia, the entire economy of the EU is on tenterhooks because they simply haven't got the energy to run their factories. And look what's happening in France with there's turmoil throughout the EU at the moment for all kinds of reasons, but they all come together seeming like the perfect storm. You've got Macron, whose country has 7 million demonstrators out this past week, burning down town centers over this pension issue, getting mad over their unemployment that's rising because their factories are closing down because they have no fuel to run the factories. Same is happening now in Germany. A lot of the stuff is coming home to roost. And yet, they're still building the fence.
Well, I kind of wonder, is that because they've realized that it's an invasion? Something that our people on the southern border and in the United States and along the northern border along the United States, that this is in essence an invasion, albeit unarmed, but it is a mass of people just deciding that this is.
The borderless concept that we spoke about some episodes ago about, well, maybe we should just throw up our hands and say we don't need borders, right? Because evidently nobody wants them, or so we're led to believe by some group, who do quite well. For example, you were telling me that the guy who lives on Roxton Road has made $50 million leasing out his property to the feds so they could put buildings on there to facilitate illegal migrants. While the Mounties are helping them with their luggage across the international boundary. I mean, come on. So there's money to be made on illegal immigration, even at quite legitimately. I mean, this guy's got a bunch of property there by Roxton Road and says, hey, if the federal government's going to give me money to.
Yeah. And not to to paint this individual as being a liberal supporter. He did the same thing when the Conservatives were in power. He donated money to the party. So yeah,
Can you blame him?
he's a total entrepreneur.
Of course. I mean, can you blame the guy?
No, there's money to be made. I mean, what's $50 million? Apparently, it wasn't enough to cause a big stink when they had that, what was it called? Arrive Can app that
Yeah, that's don't hear
it
much
still
about a
hasn't,
ride
still haven't
can
found
these
out where that
days.
money went. So
Yes, I know. Again, we've got to get. I'm speechless because the Arrive Can thing is disappeared off the front pages, but the 75 million bucks that they pissed away apparently is in somebody's pockets.
somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, right. No, all of a sudden that's all been forgotten. That drives me. This is the part of the media that I find to be so hypocritical and fickle at the same time. Come on. Don't stop finding out where that money went to and who got it. No, now we got some other shiny political bauble that they're watching. I mean, the Pierre Trudeau
it might be
Foundation that this everybody quits that outfit because obviously there's some kind of trouble brewing there and they wanted to jump ship. How does an entire board from a nonprofit organization decide, okay, we're done? You can't
well,
anything is
reminiscent
like there.
of the analogy of the ship that goes down, isn't it? All the rats like to leave first.
Yeah, well, again, that goes back to the discussion we had when the Marc Garneau pulled the pin in Canada as an MP and said, I'm out of here. He took the principled stand because he clearly knew at the time and knows that there's some toxic stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and good for him for taking the high road out.
The other story that again is percolating in the background that no one likes. Well, they're talking about it, but you have to kind of go into the weeds with the banking group and follow the international currency movements. Again, borderless stuff starts to come home to haunt you. The reserve currency of the world has been the US dollar since Bretton Woods was invented after the Second World War. So before that, it was the pound sterling was the reserve currency, then it became the dollar. But now all of a sudden, the American dollar is under attack or being undermined by the BRICS. That's the Brazilians, the Russians, the Iranians, the Chinese, the Indians. I mean, there's a whole group here who want to replace the reserve currency with gold-based currencies. That is to say, the yuan or the ruble or the lira or whatever currency. And for a while, I wasn't quite sure what they were talking about. Like, what is the story here? But then I sort of started to go into it as deep as you can if you're not a banker, okay? And I discovered that the problem with having the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world is that if you have a Federal Reserve and a US government that is thrifty, that is to say, it doesn't print money like it's been doing crazily for the last couple of years, the dollar has value because the United States stands behind the money that's circulating. There's a tremendous number of US dollars circulating outside the US as opposed to inside the US, which becomes then the de facto instrument of business for these other countries. Okay, because if you travel, the US dollar is what you exchange money, and you can't take Canadian dollars or Australian dollars or Nepalese, whatever, and walk into travel with it. You can't. You got to get US dollars, or at least until recently had to. Now it turns out that the US dollar as a reserve currency is starting to fall out of favor. Well, why is that? That's because they weaponized that with sanctions. So countries go, wait a minute, I have nothing to do with the Ukraine war. Why are you sanctioning me? So I go find some other currency to do business in. But more importantly, and this is the part that no one really talks about, but and it became really very clear to me, the debt that the U.S. government runs up, basically billions and trillions of dollars to run programs that they do either domestically or their wars all over the world, or their 700 bases in the military they have to keep running. That debt basically is downloaded to anybody else who operates with US dollars. So if you've got a pile of US dollars in your bank at whatever country you're in, that you're paying the American debt, because you have to use that money, because it becomes less and less valuable to you. So therefore, you're now shouldering the burden of America's debt through bonds, for example, that have to be paid back, right? Well, you can't. So they're saying, wait a minute, why am I going down the economic toilet here because of the profligate spending of the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve? I'm not going to use the dollar. So hence, you've got the Iranians and the Chinese and the Russians and the South Africans. Well, you know what? We'll pay ourselves in instead of petrodollars, which is the US dollar, we'll pay ourselves with our own currency, or we'll exchange gold, which of course goes back to the gold standard, which President Nixon got rid of when he was president. So, the fiat currency that we've been hearing about for decades, about how it's just paper, is now coming home. No one ever thought that, you know what, there's going to be a whole bunch of folks who do not agree with being in debt. And so they're going to find a way to get out of debt. And to do that, they use their own currencies and gold.
Yeah.
And that it really is the underlying story. That's the sleeper story, because it undermines everything that the U.S. has tried to do as a global superpower. Because if you ain't got the dough, you're not a superpower anymore. You can't pay for this large. You can't pay your military. You can't pay your domestic debts. You can't pay your foreign. Your paper money becomes paper. And then you start seeing visions of the Weimar Republic back in the early 30s, where it took a wheelbarrow full of worthless Deutschmarks to get a loaf of bread. But on this scale, this really is the story that is sleeping in the background. And again, everything is downstream. If you don't pay attention to that economic reality, connected with all to use the worst, woke programs that they're dreaming up, that 80% of the rest of the world says, no, thank you, we don't want any of this stuff. You're headed towards serious trouble.
Yeah. Well, I guess that too all goes, talking about currency. I saw something pop by, I don't know what website it was, but cryptocurrency.
Yes.
Now we joked about it before, like, oh, I've got some crypto. It's right here.
Yeah.
Look, nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows how it's generated. I mean, you can talk to me all you want about the server farms that are generating cryptocurrency and the like, but in reality, it's nothing.
Fairy dust.
And the number of people that were talking about this, well, that should be the currency that becomes the standard, not the gold standard. We'll have the cryptocurrency standard. But you have to sit back and think too that is supported by a government. So if the government decides that you have too many cryptocurrency bits, you're going to lose them, or they're going to know what you're spending them on.
Well, isn't that digital currency? And they're saying that if the government is allowed to do digital currency, we'll spare you the change and the coins and the debit cards. We'll just do, we'll give you a government one. But that's, we already saw what happens in Canada, which is supposed to be a democratic country, when a whole bunch of people who didn't like what the government was doing, their bank accounts suddenly stopped functioning. And then we don't have a cryptocurrency yet that's run by the government, but they did it even without that. They simply picked up the phone and said to the bank presidents, okay, Joe Bloggs, we're not too keen on this guy. So, you'd be wise to deal with his bank account. They didn't say shut it down. They said, we'll shut you down, meaning the banks. So the bank suddenly said, well, Joe Bloggs, his account's done. Okay. So, you're one step removed from any we really didn't do that. We just suggested that, except that if you go to a digital currency, they'll do that for real, not just a suggestion. We're headed down some very strange avenues here. Then when you take another dot to connect to. This past week, I think you're sure you saw the business of the AI chat stuff, where the big boys are saying we better stop this right now before we and figure out what this AI thing is all about, because we really don't know how to control AI. Now imagine if it decides, linked to the screwballs in government that go, well, this is a great idea, and we'll just let AI do stuff for us. I mean, are you out of your? This really is that is scary. That is,
Well, it's got to the point, yeah, like they're talking about, well, we have programs in place now that will tell us whether this is an AI generated report or not. But
yeah,
now
sure.
there are keys that they can turn to say, well, if you find that it's an AI generated report, we'll just turn that off and you'll think that it's a real one. So,
Yeah, right. I believe that like the fairy dust, exactly. Off the stage we go. No, it's amazing what is happening. I mean, these guys are playing with concepts that most people don't understand, obviously. And the new religion that's linked to it is every time you want to question something like the digital currency or like the AI, or all roads seem now to lead back to the religion of climate change. Now, just bear with me for a second. It's one of those things you can't see, you have to believe. It's all part of the mumbo jumbo that if you don't go along with it, we're all going to fry or freeze or whatever. And so whatever policy we've got going, all roads lead back to when they're put into the corner, it's climate change. And I'm like, this really is nuts, right?
And it is too, as we said on many occasions in our talks over the time, that we're seeing one aspect of something, and everything seems to be focused on that one thing. But we tend to forget that if it's like a magician, if there's something going on here, that's what our focus is on. You got to watch around somewhere else so. But anyway, yeah, we're almost out of time here, and I know we kind of wandered and done a little bit of this and
Okay,
that.
it was a missing link program.
It was
It all
missing.
links connected.
It's
It's
our
still
missing
missing,
link,
perhaps.
and hopefully this all gets tied together eventually.
Wait, well, we'll work on it next week.
Okay,
Yeah. All right, bud.
talk to you soon.
Take care.